Today we are talking about tapirs. These large herbivores are some of the most ancient of all living mammals, but they are most well known for their semi-aquatic lifestyle and their elephant-like trunk. As usual, a document with the sources for the images used, along with the research papers I found useful, will be included in the description of this video. Tapirs are mammals in the order Perissodactyla. This is the first time I have covered this order, but I have done several videos on the closely related order of Artiodactyla. If you have seen any of those videos, then you will know that artiodactyls are the even-toed ungulates. Well, Perissodactyla is their counterpart, containing the odd-toed ungulates. This distinction in the number of toes does not refer to the number of toes an animal has, but instead how many toes they use to walk. The number of toes can be difficult to tell just from looking at most of these animals, however, as most of the ungulates have hooves. Focusing back in on Perissodactyla, they have much less diversity of living animals than the artiodactyls, with only 16 or 17 species. These are divided into three different families. First is Equidae, with the horses, zebras, and asses. This is the largest of the families of living Perissodactyls with 7 species. It is also the most common of the families, which is unsurprising given the reliance on domestic horses that many people have historically had, and often still do have. Despite this, 6 out of the 7 wild species of Equidae are all on the IUCN Red List as near threatened or more endangered, but this is unfortunately common to all of the families in Perissodactyla. Horses and their relatives only use a single toe, which in the living species is covered by a hoof. While this superficially makes their feet look similar to those seen in artiodactyls, like giraffes or antelopes, structurally they are very different. The next family is Rhinocerotidae, with the rhinoceroses. There are 5 living species of rhino, found in parts of Africa and Asia. They are easily recognizable due to the large horns on their head. Although it might not look like it at first, rhinos do actually have a type of hoof. They have 3 clearly distinct toes, but these toes are rigid and the outer edge of them is covered by a partial hoof. However, the sole of their foot is still soft, unlike a horse's hoof. That brings us to the final group, and the focus of today's video, the tapirs in the family Tapiridae. There are a lot of interesting features about tapirs, but given the focus that I've placed on it with the other Perissodactyls, let us start by looking at their feet. Tapirs are actually the reason why the odd-toed and even-toed monikers given to Perissodactyls and artiodactyls are technically incorrect. Tapirs do indeed have an odd number of toes on their hind legs, with 3 on each foot. However, their front feet have 4 toes each. Their feet are specialized for walking on muddy or soft ground, and this difference in the number of toes helps stabilize them on marshy ground. Like rhinoceroses, they have partial hooves. Technically, each of their toes is a separate hoof, so their front has 4 hooves on each foot, and their hind feet have 3 on each. While this may sound odd, if you look at a tapir's feet, this can be seen quite clearly. When looking at a tapir, the most obvious feature that immediately sets them apart from other animals is their trunk. This trunk is very similar to an elephant's, although they are not closely related. Elephants are afrotherians and so are most closely related to hyraxes. Tapirs, as we have already discussed, are much closer to rhinos and horses. On tapirs, this trunk is actually their upper lip, which has been modified to be as long and mobile as it is. As such, it is made of muscle and other soft flesh. There are no bones in it. However, its presence gives them a very different skull structure compared to other Perissodactyls. Their skulls are very long and have a pronounced ridge along the top. This ridge is where the muscles for their trunk are attached, allowing it to have its strength and mobility. While the trunk is much smaller than those seen on elephants, they use it in a very similar way. It is highly flexible and used to grab food that is just out of reach, which they can then feed to themselves. Tapirs are semi-aquatic. Although they do not necessarily need a large body of water to survive, if there is one, then they will certainly make use of it. They will enter it, walking along the riverbed, and completely submerge themselves. Despite their large size, tapirs are excellent swimmers, and it is possible that their unusual feet help with this. There are many reasons for them to enter the water. They will feed on aquatic plants, cool themselves off during the day, and they have been observed letting fish eat parasites from them. Submerging themselves is also a defensive strategy, as it allows them to hide from predators. They will not only use rivers, but also appreciate mud baths, rolling in mud to cool off or help control parasites. Tapirs are part of the larger superfamily Tapiridae, which includes the extinct relatives of modern-day tapirs. These appear in the fossil record quite early in the evolution of mammals, with the earliest members first appearing over 50 million years ago during the early Eocene. They likely originated in Europe, but tapiroids quickly became common in both Asia and North America. Although separated by the Bering Strait today, these two continents have frequently had a land bridge connecting them in the past, allowing animals to easily move from one landmass to the other. When the land bridge disappears, this cuts off this access, causing the different species to evolve in isolation from each other. Returning the focus to Tapiridae, there may only be one living genus of tapirs, but many extinct genera are known. The earliest of these is Protapirus, living in France about 34 million years ago. Protapirus is the most known species of any extinct genus of tapir, only to be outdone by Tapirus, the only genus with species still alive today. Other genera are known, however, such as Eotapirus from North America from about 30 million years ago, or Plesiotapirus from China and Japan about 23 to 16 million years ago. Just from this information, you can get the sense of the dispersal of tapirs across Eurasia and North America. If they did originate in Europe, as the fossil record suggests, then it did not take them long to spread into Asia and then across the Bering Land Bridge into North America. The modern distribution of tapirs actually shows this dispersal quite well. While tapirs are no longer found in either Europe or North America, the least related of the living tapirs is the only one still found in Asia. After that is the Central American species, followed by the two in South America. So they clearly dispersed from Eurasia into North America and then into South America during the Great American Biotic Interchange. As a side note, this is quite similar to the evolution and dispersal undergone by camels and llamas. So for more information on that and the Great American Biotic Interchange, have a look at my video on the topic. Anyway, the last tapir known in Europe was Tapirus arvenensis. They were quite well spread, with fossils found in France, Spain, the Netherlands, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania and Greece, but they went extinct about 2.6 million years ago. Another notable species was the giant tapir, Tapirus augustus, which was one of the last species in Asia. It survived until about 12,000 years ago, near the end of the last ice age, and its remains have been found in China and Southeast Asia. As you might guess from the common name, it was much larger than the living species, with an estimated weight of 623 kilograms or 1,373 pounds. To be fair, modern tapirs are still very large animals, as the largest of them, the Malayan tapir, can still get up to 400 kilograms or 882 pounds. That is a good segue to start talking about the modern tapirs. As I have already mentioned, the first of them on the phylogeny is the only remaining Asian species, the Malayan tapir, Tapirus indicus. They are the largest living tapir, getting up to 2.4 meters or 8 feet long, and standing just over 1 meter or 3.5 feet at the shoulder. The Malayan tapir also has the longest trunk of any of the living tapirs, which helps it to gather food that would otherwise be out of its reach. Malayan tapirs are highly distinctive, with black head, legs and shoulders, but a starkly contrasted white back and rump. Although the adults look markedly different from the other tapir species, the young look very similar to other tapir calves. Their fur is reddish-brown with distinctive white stripes and spots. This provides extremely good camouflage in the forest, allowing them to hide from predators and other threats. Malayan tapirs are known for their extremely poor eyesight. Their eyes are small and are positioned on the sides of the head, resulting in their poor vision. Additionally, they often suffer from a condition called corneal cloudiness. This is where the transparent part protecting the front of the eye becomes hazy or cloudy. This can usually be seen as a blue haze over the iris. It is unknown what causes this condition, but it is thought to be related to either repetitive exposure to light or trauma. Malayan tapirs compensate for this very bad eyesight by using their excellent hearing and smell. Malayan tapirs are found in Southeast Asia, in parts of Thailand, Myanmar, Malaysia and Indonesia. However, as they rely on the rainforests, their populations have become more and more fragmented as deforestation and urbanization are common throughout the area. Due to these pressures, Malayan tapirs have disappeared from much of their historic range, which included Cambodia, Laos, and southern China. It is perhaps unsurprising, then, that Malayan tapirs are considered endangered by the IUCN. Large animals like tapirs need a large area to thrive, and Malayan tapirs are estimated to have ranges of 10 to 20 square kilometres, or 4 to 8 square miles. This, of course, is an issue when deforestation is occurring at the rate it is in Southeast Asia. Deforestation has other impacts as well, including making the remaining habitat fragmented, so separating tapir populations. This can cause problems with finding mates, for example. Deforestation and the fragmentation of their habitat is also worsened by the construction of dams, which can cause large sections of forest to be flooded. It also brings tapirs into more contact with humans, leading to the other main causes of their decline. Road accidents are a real issue, especially in Malaysia. In 2020 alone, 24 tapirs were recorded as roadkill. While this might not seem like a lot, it is significant when it is estimated that only 1,100 to 1,500 Malayan tapirs remain in the wild. Poachers can also be an issue. They usually don't actually target Malayan tapirs, but the tapirs can get caught in traps intended for tigers and other animals. This often causes them to suffer severe injuries, and even if the poacher doesn't kill them directly, they will often die later, either due to infection from the injury or stress. If they do catch a tapir, poachers can sell their meat, or their thick hide can be used for whips and bridles. However, they are not specifically targeted, as their meat does not sell for much money, and is forbidden by many local communities due to cultural or religious beliefs. This means that when poachers do catch a tapir, they often discard it instead of even trying to sell it. There are many initiatives in place to try and protect the remaining tapirs. There are protected national parks and wildlife sanctuaries to try and give tapirs safe places to live. It is illegal to hunt them in most areas, and signs along roadsides have been erected to increase awareness of tapirs in the area. Additionally, there are several rescue and rehabilitation programs to heal and release injured or mistreated tapirs to the wild, as well as scientific research and monitoring that aims to better understand them to help improve the conservation strategies used by the various countries. The next species of living tapirs is Baird's tapir, Tapirus bairdii. They are also sometimes known as the Central American tapir, as they are found from southern Mexico through Central America and into northern Colombia. While not as striking as the Malayan tapir, they are distinctive for their light-coloured jaw, throat, and the tips of their ears, while the rest of their head and body is a greyish-brown. It is the largest of the American tapirs, getting up to 2.5 metres or over 8 feet long, and standing up to 1.2 metres or 47 inches at the shoulder. Baird's tapirs can live in a variety of habitats, from wet mangroves, marshes and swamps, to drier areas including deciduous forests and montane cloud forests. They can be found from sea level up to elevations of 3,600 metres or 11,800 feet. Baird's tapirs are typically solitary animals, but do form long-term monogamous pairs. Together, these pairs will defend their territory. They can breed all year, but do so more often during the rainy season. They typically have a single calf at a time, and both parents help raise it. They usually move together as a family unit while the calf is young. Calves are weaned from 6 to 8 months, during which their mother gradually introduces them to solid food. Calves stay with their parents until they are 1.5 to 2 years old. Young tapirs become sexually mature at about 2.5 to 3 years old. Similar to the Malayan tapir, and in fact most other perissodactyls, Baird's tapir is endangered. They are threatened by a combination of deforestation, forest fires, diseases, and water pollution. Although poaching can also be an issue, it is not particularly common. Still, with such an endangered animal, any deaths are a significant blow to the remaining population. Tapirs are protected in Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, Costa Rica, and Panama, making them illegal to hunt. The issue with this is that such laws are often not enforced, and often cannot be enforced, given that it usually happens well away from populated areas. This is also combined with the effects of illegal logging in many of these countries that causes habitat loss and fragmentation. One of the main goals throughout Central America that would help tapirs is to establish a continuous band of forest from Mexico to Panama. This is known as the Mesoamerican Biological Corridor and would drastically help many species, not only tapirs, but also jaguars and other threatened forest-dwelling animals move throughout their range. Given the amount of land this would need to cover, there are major issues to its implementation, but if it happened, it would certainly promote the biodiversity in the region and hopefully halt the decline of many of the threatened species. Although captive specimens can help in breeding programs, that actually raises a different issue facing the Baird's tapir. The small population of them held in North and Central American zoos and facilities have very limited genetic diversity, and so face problems with inbreeding. This has also caused their genetic profile to actually diverge from those found in wild populations, and so without careful managing of the breeding program, much of the genetic diversity found in the wild will be lost if the species continues to decline. The smallest species of tapir is the mountain tapir, Tapirus pinchaque. Its scientific name comes from the mythological elephant-like animal, La pinchaque, which is said to inhabit the same mountains as the mountain tapir. They are also known as the Andes tapir or the woolly tapir, and are found in the cloud forests and alpine tundra in the Andes mountain range in Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. They can be found at elevations up to 4,300 meters or 14,000 feet, and have several adaptations to help with the altitude and climate. In sharp contrast to the other tapir species, they have a thick woolly coat to protect them from the cold. They are also the only tapir that can be found outside of forests, and so its short legs and splayed toes help it clamber over rocky terrain. They have a distinctive white color around its mouth, but the rest of its body is dark brown. Mountain tapirs have the smallest trunk of any living tapir. Despite these differences from the other tapir species, some questions have been raised about the validity of the mountain tapir as a separate species. Genetic studies have shown that it diverged from the South American tapir less than 3 million years ago, and may not yet be sufficiently different from it to constitute a separate species, instead possibly being a subspecies. This has not been widely implemented yet, with most organisations still recognising it as a separate species pending further research into this issue. To be honest, whether it is a different species or another subspecies of the South American tapir, it still has enough interesting differences to take up some time in this video regardless. Although most tapir species do not have many predators that will target the adults, with only jaguars, crocodiles or tigers being large enough to take them on, and often not being successful if they try. However, mountain tapirs are a little smaller and so have more threats, including cougars, spectacled bears, and even domestic dogs. Like the other tapirs, mountain tapirs are endangered, with less than 2,500 left in the wild. Conservation efforts are problematic, however, as they require large amounts of unspoiled alpine terrain. Since its current range is not large, it essentially means that any human incursions into it, whether logging montane forests or building roads or settlements, would seriously threaten the survival of the mountain tapir. The last species of tapir is the South American tapir, Tapirus terrestris. It has a variety of other names, including the Brazilian tapir, Amazonian tapir, maned tapir, or lowland tapir. Local names include La Sachavaca, a mixture of Spanish and Quechua, which translates to bush cow. It can be found throughout the Amazon rainforest and the Amazon River basin, although it does seem to be more reliant on nearby sources of water than either of the other American tapirs. It is uniformly dark brown and lacks most of the white markings seen in the other tapir species, only retaining distinctive white patches around its ears. The South American tapir also has a mane reminiscent of a horse's down the back of its neck. While other tapirs do technically have a mane, it is a lot larger and more distinct in this species. South American tapirs can run surprisingly fast for such a large animal, reaching speeds of up to 48 km per hour or 30 miles per hour. They are also excellent swimmers and divers, using their trunk as a snorkel to breathe underwater. As with other tapirs, they use water to escape from predators and will often submerge themselves and feed in water. Not much is known about their social interactions, but they typically mate in April to June. The gestation period is 13 months, and females typically have one calf every 2 years. As with other tapirs, their calves have a light brown coat with white stripes and spots. The young are weaned after 6 months and stay with their mother for 12 to 18 months before becoming completely independent. Young tapirs become sexually mature at 3 years old. South American tapirs are less threatened than the other tapir species, but are still considered vulnerable by the IUCN. As you might expect, habitat destruction is the leading threat to the South American tapir, but poaching is also an issue in some areas. The conservation initiatives to help them are similar to those we've talked about with the other species, creating corridors of habitat to help with fragmentation, raising public awareness, fighting against poaching, and leading scientific monitoring and research efforts. There is actually still a lot that is unknown about the South American tapir, but it is hoped that these efforts, combined with its large range, will help to preserve this species for future generations. Despite the fact I said earlier that there are only 4 living species of tapir, it has been argued that a 5th one should be counted, the little black tapir. To make a long story short, that is because the little black tapir is controversial, with most scientists today believing that they are South American tapirs. However, I did want to include them in the video, as the controversy is quite interesting. The little black tapir was proposed as a new species by Coswell et al. In 2013, and given the scientific name of Tapirus carbomani. If it is accepted as a new species, then this would make it the first new Perissodactyl discovered in the last 100 years. It would also be the smallest living tapir, as its weight has been estimated at only 110 kilograms or 240 pounds. However, there are serious doubts about its validity as a separate species. While I called it controversial earlier, it is less of a controversy and more a widely accepted fact that the little black tapir is not a separate species. At best, it might be a subspecies of the South American tapir, but even this has yet to be proven. Less than a year after the study proposing the little black tapir as its own species, Voss et al. Published a scathing rebuke of their study, finding that the evidence was inadequate to prove the existence of the little black tapir. I do just want to briefly highlight some of the points made by Voss et al. Not only is this relevant for talking about the little black tapir, it is also interesting to learn about the standards that are expected when describing a new species. First is the genetic analysis performed in 2013. Genetic analyses can get quite complicated, so I will keep this brief. In the analysis done by Coswell et al., they found a variance of around 1.3% in the genetic code between the South American tapir and the proposed little black tapir. While this might sound like something notable to someone with little familiarity with genetic sequencing, Voss et al. Point out that this is well within the expected variance typically found in a single species of mammal. Voss et al. Even did their own genetic analyses, using the same dataset as Coswell et al., but using different methods to try and see if there was any validity to calling little black tapirs a different species. What they found led them to recommend that more research into the genetics of South American tapirs is definitely needed. This is because not only should little black tapirs be the same species as South American ones, but their reanalysis also brought into question the validity of mountain tapirs as a separate species. Voss et al. Made many other points about Coswell et al.'s paper, but the other one that I want to mention is the use of local knowledge. Amusingly, Voss et al. Seem to take offense at the other paper's implication that indigenous knowledge is rarely considered by researchers. But more importantly, Voss et al. Point out that while indigenous input is undoubtedly valuable, simply because locals have different names for animals that look a little different does not mean that these are distinct species. They cite instances of the Cacataibo people in Peru, recognizing 7 species of tapir, or the Aguaruna people, also in Peru, who recognize 4 species of coati and 4 species of tamandua. These have each turned out to be a single species, the South American coati and the southern tamandua, respectively. Ethnic groups having multiple names for the same species is more the rule than the exception, so using this as evidence is extremely unreliable. So, little black tapirs probably don't exist. They're South American tapirs, mistakenly classified as a different species. I should also point out that Voss et al. Are not the only researchers to publish research that is critical of the little black tapir's existence. For example, Ruiz Garcia et al. In 2016 reached similar conclusions, although they were focusing on the phylogenetics of mountain tapirs and not directly critiquing the 2013 research paper. Before finishing, I did want to take a moment to mention the cultural impacts of tapirs, as they have some interesting depictions around the world. The most well known of these is probably the Baku from Japan. Baku are yokai that are known for devouring nightmares and so letting people rest easier. Because of this, they are also often considered guardians, protecting against bad luck and evil spirits. Through the connection with Baku, tapirs have sometimes appeared in Japanese media, such as with Pokemon like Drowsy and Mushana. Many South American cultures also revere the tapir. They are seen as a sign of fertility, possibly due to the tapir's role in dispersing seeds and so helping the forest flourish. The tapir also features in creation stories of many tribes, and often has the role of a cunning trickster. It takes on this role as these tribes see tapirs as intelligent, since its trunk is ideal for foraging in the dense forest. I hope you enjoyed this video. Tapirs are fascinating animals, known for their odd appearance and affinity for water. As one of the older mammalian lineages, their evolutionary history is also extremely interesting. Unfortunately, like most perissodactyls, they are under threat, with deforestation and poaching being major reasons for their decline. Thank you for listening, and feel free to suggest another group of animals you want to see me cover in the comments.